All over the country, communities are celebrating the day with parades, cookouts, and demonstrations. Yet amid the celebrations is a call to action to acknowledge there is much more work to be done.
Republicans voted for this holiday, but yet not one of them are willing to vote for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So I feel like you're giving us a crumb, and it's a diversion from the real issue.
And that leads us to the split-screen moment facing America this Juneteenth. Republican-led states all over the nation have enacted or are considering legislation that many activists argue would make it increasingly difficult for people of color to vote, their constitutional right as Americans. While signing the Juneteenth legislation, President Biden highlighted how Juneteenth would be hollow if the right to vote is not protected on the federal level.
It's not going to be fulfilled so long as the sacred right to vote remains under attack. We see this assault from restrictive laws, threats of intimidation, voter purges, and more. An assault that offends the very democracy, our very democracy. We can't rest till the promise of equality is fulfilled for every one of us in every corner of this nation. That, to me, is the meaning of Juneteenth.
That we have been celebrating this for over 150 years, that our people have literally been celebrating our liberation, but we're also acknowledging, in the spirit of celebrating that liberation, we're also acknowledging that we've still got work to do in this nation. Until all of us are free, none of us are free. And that one of the real components of a democracy is people having free and fair access to the ballot. Currently in 47 states all around this nation, what we're seeing is voter suppression laws, just like my home state of Georgia, where just currently, even yesterday, the Secretary of State is saying that he's going to purge 100,000 voters from the rolls in the state of Georgia. And so more than ever, we need federal legislation that at the very least is going to make sure that we protect the rights of voters in a democracy, that is going to set a standard, a federal standard, which the For the People Act does, for voting rights. And secondly, we need the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act to restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Voting rights is always connected to economic justice. Why is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce applauding Manchin in his stance against voting rights, his stance on the filibuster? So what we have to understand is when you suppress the vote, you also suppress people who would get elected from those votes that would push living wages for the 32 million people who make less than $15 an hour, and health care for the 87 million people who are either uninsured or underinsured, and change for the 140 million poor and low-wealth people. So the fight against voter suppression is not just black, it's class, it's against progress. That's why I don't call it Jim Crow, I call it James Crow Esquire. Because what they are doing will hurt black people, brown people, native people, Asian people, women, the disabled, and young people. And that's why we all better join this fight to save this democracy and make sure that voting rights are protected.
So they do not want the federal government, they don't want Congress in the midst of making laws that would give us federal standards, because instead what they want to do is at the state level have a power grab around our democracy. And so they have absolutely no intention of dealing with Manchin or anyone else. And, Manchin, good for him that he wanted bipartisan, but now we're over that. It's time to keep moving because democracy is on the line. And remember this, Alicia, the Supreme Court's getting ready to rule in a very important voting rights case that could kill the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so now is the time for Congress to act because the House is on fire.
Fire! Well, run, boy! Wake the others! There's a fire! House servants! Get buckets, get kettles, fill them up with water, with some sacks. That fire spreads is going to be hell to pay. Now get! Come go see what that is. What about the Hammond? What about the Hammond? We know about the fire. Oh, ain't the fire, ain't the fire. What about the Hammond? What about the Hammond? Christian Bonjour.
Oh, Master Hammond, they're coming to kill you.
What?
They're coming, Master Hammond.
Who?
Lucy see it. I see it. They're coming. They're coming. All them niggas have come. All them niggas have come last night and blaze. They get loose. They got bars, pickforks, and sickles. And they're coming.